The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
Mexico and Canada have taken advantage of the United States.
Because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state, and the people of Canada like it.
Something shifted in Washington. To the untrained eye, it looked like the opening strike of a decisive confrontation, a calculated checkmate designed to push Canada into a corner. The world watched, expecting Ottawa to capitulate, waiting for the smaller economy to buckle under the weight of the American giant. But then, the impossible happened. The pressure didn't break the target, it ricocheted. Three of the most powerful figures in U.S. policy moved in perfect sync, launching a coordinated assault to reshape North America's trade landscape. For a brief, terrifying moment, it felt as though the entire continent was bracing for a shockwave rolling in only one direction, north. But that shockwave just reversed course. Instead of a Canadian surrender, we are witnessing a phenomenon that few in the White House anticipated. The leverage aimed at Ottawa has started stirring chaos inside the United States itself. From a manufacturing contraction unseen since the 2008 financial crisis to major American corporations now suing their own government, the strategy meant to secure American dominance is arguably doing the exact opposite. Did Washington just accidentally trigger the destabilization of its own economy? To understand how this backfired so spectacularly, we have to look at the first strike. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a rumor. It was a coordinated siege. The escalation began with U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer delivering a cold, calculated warning. The United States is prepared to walk away from the USMCA in 2026. This wasn't just a negotiation tactic, it was a threat to detonate the nuclear option on the economic framework that has held North America together for decades. When asked about renegotiating with automakers, the response was dismissive, hinting that Washington might let the deal expire entirely or fracture it into separate, weaker agreements with Mexico and Canada. But the rhetoric didn't stop at trade deals. It got personal. President Trump escalated the narrative to a level of bluntness that unsettled diplomats and rattled global investors. He declared a distinct intent to push back hard, going so far as to suggest that Ottawa should be treated like a 51st state. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was a challenge to sovereignty. The final rupture in relations came when the U.S. ambassador publicly targeted Canada's internal political advertising rules, claiming they had a cross-border impact. Ottawa disputed this immediately, causing talks to stall completely. The message from Washington was clear: submit or face a fractured continent. The threat of splitting the USMCA into two separate bilateral agreements was the ultimate divide-and-conquer strategy. For a moment, the regional balance seemed on the verge of total collapse. Washington believed they had the ultimate leverage. They believed Canada had nowhere to run. They were wrong. While Washington was focused on the external target, the weapon they fired began to recoil, damaging the very economy it was designed to protect. The expectation was simple: squeeze Canada and they will fold. But the reality is far more complex and far more dangerous for the American consumer. The reverse effect of these aggressive policies has become undeniably visible in the key vital signs of the U.S. economy. Look at the data. U.S. manufacturing didn't just stumble, it entered a free fall. Leading up to November 2025, the sector experienced a decline for 9 consecutive months, marking the longest sustained contraction since the 2008 global financial crisis. This is a screaming red alert. Transport equipment manufacturers, the absolute bellwether for industrial health, began panic-cutting personnel. Worse, they started moving portions of their production offshore, fleeing the unpredictability of the U.S. policy environment in search of stability. The pain has trickled down to the average American household. Cyber Monday, historically the gold standard for consumer confidence, was a disaster. Sales increased by a meager 2.6%, a clear signal that the looming threat of tariffs and trade wars is already strangling household budgets. And now, the corporate giants are turning on the government. Major players like Costco have initiated legal challenges against the U.S. administration, seeking tariff refunds in actions that could cost Washington billions of dollars in settlements. Industry observers are now whispering a terrifying truth. Investment funds are increasingly categorizing the United States as a high-policy risk jurisdiction. The capital that was supposed to stay in America is beginning to look for an exit door. And ironically, the safest place for that money to go might just be the country Washington tried to crush. While the American economic landscape began to fracture under increasing policy-driven volatility, Canada didn't just survive, it evolved. It emerged as a focal point for global businesses desperate to mitigate risk. This presented a significant, albeit unexpected, advantage for Ottawa. As investors looked at the chaos south of the border, they saw Canada not as a target, but as a sanctuary. The numbers prove it. Canada has maintained the second highest foreign direct investment to GDP ratio within the entire G20, solidifying its position as a safe harbor for international capital. Foreign direct investment into Canada didn't just tick up, it surged by nearly $78 billion, pushing the total to a staggering $1.5 trillion. Some analysts suggest this figure has surpassed even the internal estimates of the U.S. government. Why? Because Canada's extensive network of over 50 free trade agreements created a loophole in the American strategy. Companies from the European Union, Japan, and South Korea have increasingly chosen Canada as their North American base. This strategy is brilliant in its simplicity. It allows these global giants to remain physically proximate to the massive U.S. market while effectively sidestepping potential U.S. tariffs and political unpredictability. They get the access without the chaos. The combination of robust infrastructure, a highly skilled workforce, and most importantly, consistent policy frameworks, has positioned Canada favorably over the U.S. in terms of predictability. And for long-term investment, predictability is currency. Many U.S. corporations, rather than expanding domestically, are now considering Canada a buffer zone during periods of heightened policy fluctuation. Washington wanted to isolate Canada, but instead, they've made it the most attractive real estate on the continent. But Canada isn't just taking the money, they are fundamentally redesigning their economic DNA. As external trade barriers gained prominence, Ottawa began a process of internal industrial reconstruction. This isn't just about trade, it's about survival. The pivot aims to slash dependencies and bolster domestic capabilities, specifically to stop relying on American supply chains that can be weaponized at any moment. Canadian businesses initiated aggressive efforts to repatriate manufacturing operations. The goal is clear: diminish reliance on U.S.-based components. This strategic shift reflects a harsh recognition of the vulnerabilities exposed by recent trade tensions. Surveys now indicate that 72% of Canadian manufacturers actively support incentives for nearshoring and the localization of supply chains. It is a collective, national push towards self-sufficiency. And the results are already visible in the energy sector, a shift that should worry American policymakers. Take Newfoundland and Labrador as the prime example. 2 decades ago, less than 10% of its oil went to Europe. Today, over 50% of its oil is directed across the Atlantic, bypassing the United States entirely. They are actively cutting the cord. Beyond commodities, Canada's export of technology, engineering, and R&D services has begun to accelerate, actually outpacing traditional commodity exports in growth. This suggests the emergence of a new value layer in the Canadian economy. Industries vital to the future, such as electric vehicles and critical minerals, are benefiting significantly from this reorientation. The world is increasingly viewing Canada as a stable, clean, and low-risk source of essential inputs, while the U.S. is viewed as a high-risk gamble. The supply chains are splitting. One system for the U.S. and a new, independent system for the rest of the world. The trajectory of Washington's external pressure appears to be diverging sharply from its intended outcome. While some economies experienced a contraction of trade relationships and an escalation of commercial disputes, Canada pursued an expanded global engagement strategy. This outward focus has transformed a crisis into an opportunity for market diversification. Canada is actively broadening its export outreach to the European Union, India, and aggressive Asian markets, seeking new avenues for trade that exist completely outside Washington's sphere of influence. The Asian business community, in particular, has begun to perceive Canada as a clean gateway for accessing Western markets, offering predictable regulatory environments and secure supply routes that the U.S. currently cannot guarantee. Canada's comprehensive free trade agreements provide its businesses with a distinct advantage, granting direct access to numerous markets where U.S. enterprises are experiencing diminishing preferential treatment. This leads us to the ultimate irony of this geopolitical standoff. What was designed to compel Canada into alignment is, in practice, accelerating its independent economic development faster than any analyst projected. Should the U.S. proceed with a withdrawal from the USMCA? One scenario suggests Canada could solidify its position as the alternative manufacturing and supply chain hub within North America. This is a development that was clearly not part of Washington's original calculation. By introducing policy volatility, the U.S. has inadvertently led global enterprises to choose Canada as a new anchor point. Canada is strategically positioning itself across critical sectors: electric vehicles, essential minerals, energy production, and high technology. This shift risks altering regional power dynamics permanently. Some observers suggest the U.S. is facing a potential scenario where its own policy actions weaken its long-standing economic leadership role within the region. The real question now hangs in the air, heavier than anyone expected. Has the attempt to exert leverage inadvertently created a more formidable competitor right at the immediate border? Washington wanted a compliant partner. Instead, they may have forged a rival that is more globally connected, more resilient, and less dependent on the United States than ever before. The regional power dynamics have been altered in ways no one anticipated, and the economic fallout is only just beginning. If you want to continue exploring these shifting trends and the stories that don't always make it into the headlines, make sure to like and subscribe. The map is changing, and we'll be here to track every move.